so much for hanging in here the last half hour. For those of you that are up here at the front, I appreciate it. And for those of you that have come back 2 days in a row or 3 panels in a row, thank you, thank you, thank you. And for my repeats from last year, I saw a whole bunch of you. Thank you for that too. My name is Tiffany Soto, and I am a master level sake educator. What that means is that I spent a lot of time in Japan, and I've bowed and apologized a lot for my poor pronunciations. And somewhere along the way, learned to taste sake exceptionally well and educate all of you, hopefully to an equal level. I speak about 30 times a year all over the United States, but you guys are my favorite. I live right here in Maryland, and frankly, you guys just give so much love, and that's why I keep coming and doing it, and I really appreciate that. A lot of you who know me know that I'm very into social media. I believe in getting as much sake love out there into the world as I can, because it's an uphill battle, like trying to introduce it to the United States. And so if any of you are social and you're into social posting for this whole weekend, I'm at Hey Sake Lady. Always have been, always will be, everywhere. Our hashtags, Otakon Pie, that's all of my panels this year. So if you're using hashtags, Otakon Pie, obviously Otakon 2014, and Sake or Sake 101. Okay, without further ado, all of you have flyers in front of you. That's not all the education you're going to get. It's just a couple things to take away that might help you somewhere along the way with what you need to know when you go out and read a menu in the world. On the back, you'll see a thank you for me, first of all, because that's the first thing I want to do always, is thank you. And the second thing you'll see back there is that we're going out for another after party tonight. Last night was epic and awesome, and for all of you that came, thank you so much. And we are riding the circulator this time, I swear. We're not walking the whole way. Although, it might have been worth the shots, right? I bought shots for everyone that walked with me last night. Alright, so here we go. A little history. We're going to start with some just basic roundabout knowledge. Sake has been around in some form or fashion for about 2,000 years. We're not exactly sure, we don't have an exact date of when it started to be produced, but what we do know is that about 1,000 years ago, it started to look a little bit more like what sake looks like today. It's really important to recognize that the last 100 years have made epic changes to sake, mainly due to advances in refrigeration, the ability to isolate yeast strains, and many, many other technological advances that have made it easier to be produced consistently. Few facts. 689 AD, the Imperial Palace in Nara established the first sake brewing department. You would think at that point they knew sake was their drink, which is interesting. They didn't actually make it the official drink of Japan until 2004. Small discrepancy. Sorry, guys. 1570, Japan had its first documented instance of pasteurization, way, way, way before Louis Pasteur was inventing pasteurization. 1904 was the establishment of the National Sake Brewing Research Institute, which is where I do a lot of my training. So what is sake? What is sake? How many people here had sake? How many people here had sake that was not hot? Yeah, nice. Okay, so what is sake? It is not hot battery acid you drink at 3 in the morning with bad sushi. It is not rice wine. It is not a spirit. It's not a beer. It's a unique beverage produced in a unique way, unlike anything else on this planet Earth. Big misconceptions. Generally, sake at a premium or super premium level should be served cold, not hot. Sipped, not shot. And my other rule is if you drop it in a beer, I'll call security. You're going to do it anyway. You will. Alright, a lot of people think that sake is really, really high in alcohol content. Big misconception. On average, sake is actually about 15.5 to 16.5% alcohol. About the same as a Napa Valley Red, Zinfandel in a hot year, or anything from Australia. And it generally will not give you a hangover. Huge misconception. When you mix it with a whole bunch of other alcohol, you're going to get a hangover. That's your fault. you're lacking individual sugar, it's sulfite-free, and you don't have any of the impurities that actually contribute to those hangovers. So it's not going to do that to you. What we're going to talk about first is the components of sake. When we talk about the components, we'll talk about them individually, and then we'll comprehensively go into how they come together to produce sake. We'll start with rice. Rice grains used to brew sake are typically 3 times bigger than table rice. That's by grain. The grain is 3 times bigger. There are more than 100 varieties of rice used in sake today. About 100 of them are certified, but it changes every year. A couple years ago, there were only 70 certified because the tsunami can cause damage and things were different. So it changes every single year. Overall, there's 300 varieties they grow in Japan, so less than a third of the varieties are used for sake production. The structure of grain of rice that's used for sake is very, very different. It has, well, again, a very large shape, right? It starts off with a brown rice. Then you take away that outside brown husk, and what you get inside is something that looks like, in the very middle, a white puffy cloud. This is important. It's called the shinpaku. The shinpaku is what makes sake rice unique. It's the absolute best part of the rice for brewing sake. It's a little cluster of air and starch molecules. Everything on the outside is fatty amino acids and things that molecular binders that hold the rice together, but it's not what makes good sake. Rice varieties that you should know. There's going to be a test on this later. Yamane Nishiki. Good to know. It's the most popular, the most sought after, the most expensive of all sake rices. It produces excellent sake, and generally speaking, if you go out into a restaurant and you say, I want a sake made with Yamane Nishiki, they usually brag about it on the bottle, then you're going to get a good sake. That's generally the case. Next up, koshi no machi or omachi rice is very, very good, but hard to find in the United States. Gohyaku mangoku. That's the one we're going to test on later. I'm not kidding. You're all going to get a test. I have prizes. Alright, so Gohyaku mangoku is another one that's fantastic for blending, makes excellent sake. A lot of times you see Yamane Nishiki blended with Gohyaku mangoku. The rest of these are very, very light. It gets more and more minute the further you go down the road. As you can see, they're all very different from one another. Rice is not rice is not rice. Every strain of rice is different. The ideal structure of rice when it's harvested for sake brewing, what you want is something that's got enough husk to protect the grain, but still has a very large grain ratio. If you don't have husk, that's those strings that come down around it to protect it, what happens is typhoon winds come ashore and they blow it, and pests descend on the crop, and they eat it, and there's no protection for that rice. That means the crop becomes more costly, and so does your sake, which we don't want. Baby rice. Without fail, the hardest job I've ever done was planting rice. I don't know how they do it. They're like one by one, in little tiny rows, over and over again, while your feet are sunk a foot down in wet mud, and then at the end of the day, you can't lay down flat to get into bed, and you're stuck. But it's important. And they do it beautifully. Look how zen-like that is. Mine was like a crazy figure eight that was drunk. It didn't look like that at all. It's terrible. When the rice has been milled just a little bit so you can get rid of that brown husk, can you see those white puffy clouds in there? This is not, in my opinion, an ideal batch of rice. The clouds are pretty inconsistent, but you can definitely see them in the photo, which is why I used it. Those are the shinpakus. That's right, those are the shinpakus. Moving on to water. Many, many brewers would say water is the most important ingredient in sake. Now, a lot of people would say, well, no, it has to be rice. You can transport rice pretty easily. You cannot transport water very easily, and you certainly couldn't 3 or 4 or 500 years ago, and definitely not 1,000 years ago. Most breweries establish their brewery in a location known for exceptional water. They sought out beautiful water. They sought out epic springs and beautiful well spots that they could found their entire brewery around, or entire rice fields in their brewery. It was really the giver of life. Okay. So the water is very, very important. Soft water is what's most important. Now, by and large, pretty much all water in Japan is softer than almost all water here. There are exceptions, but for the most part, the water is exceptionally soft, and it tastes really, really good. thimble, and a giant cup of green tea. So you ask for many, many thimbles and you can drink a good water. The most important thing that you have to look for when you're using water for making sake is that it cannot have any significant concentration of either iron or manganese. Okay? Iron and manganese can be detrimental to the brewing of any sake. Generally, it's not found frequently in Japan, but there are areas, Naka specifically, has some iron and manganese in a couple areas. Oh, that's one of my favorite wells. It's like 300 years old and it's still dripping. They have a new one. It doesn't come at that speed for the whole brewing season, but they still have this one for austerity's sake, I guess. Moving on to yeast. There are thousands of types of yeast out there. Some of them are naturally occurring. Many of them have been isolated in a lab and are reproduced. They each have specific attributes that make them ideal for brewing sake. But the one thing, the only thing you really need to know about yeast is that it is the #1 contributor of aromatics in a sake. There's not a rice on this earth that smells like bananas or cantaloupe. Okay? There's no rice out there that smells like wet leaves and mulch. There's no rice out there that smells like dried pineapple. But through a very elegant coming together of yeast and rice, you can produce those types of aromatics in sake. My favorite's green apple rind. I love it. Some sakes are produced with yeasts that just follow naturally from the environment. A lot of them, they can be isolated. You can tell what kind of yeast it was, but others are wildflower yeast that they don't isolate at all. They just come and do crazy things in a batch of sake and go away and you never see it again. Main yeast that I like to talk about, K7 is a really great one. It was isolated in 1946 during World War II when there was actually a rice shortage and people were supposed to slow down their brewing and they kept working through the winter and they isolated K7 yeast. People had journeyed from miles and miles around to this little brewery. It's not a little brewery anymore, it's huge now, but it was a little brewery in Nagano. And they said that they loved the aromatics they kept smelling. They didn't know what it was. It was bananas. There were a whole lot of bananas being shipped to Japan in 1946. It was bananas, and now to this day, K7 is one of the most widely used yeast strains in Japan because they love the smell of bananas. Alright, let's bring it to my sake 102 stuff. Byproducts. If there's anybody who's kind of scientific-y and geeky, I'll go over this because I like it. So if you're smelling strawberry, banana, or pineapple, or licorice in a sake, it's usually a byproduct of cupric acid that's created during the fermentation process. If you get like a sweet, thin style of sake or something with a lot of earthiness, you're getting something with a lot of ethyl acetate. The same is true for any kind of citrus. Any kind of citrus is definitely ethyl acetate. And when you move on, isoamyl acetate is bananas. And K7 is all about the isoamyl acetate. Which brings us to our fourth ingredient, kojikin. Kojikin is a mold spore, Aspergillus oryzae. And people look at me sometimes and they say, mold? Why is there mold in my sake? Have you ever taken penicillin? There's mold in that. Have you ever eaten cheese? There was mold in that. Have you ever had a great glass of Riesling? It was great because there was mold on those grapes. It has a very important function, and it's an amazing thing that it does. With few exceptions, almost all, 99.8% of all sake is produced using yellow koji. There's different colors, black, white, green, red. If you use red koji, the sake turns red. You can't find red sake even available here in the United States. I've rarely seen sake made using black koji. It smelled like a cinnamon roll, so it was kind of cool. But it fell apart very quickly. It couldn't hold up long enough to do the shipping, so they don't create it in any large quantities. But it was very cool when I got to taste it.